The German tank commander was laughing so hard he could barely see through his vision slit. Somewhere in northern France, spring 1940, he just watched a British infantryman struggling to aim what looked less like a weapon and more like a drainpipe mounted on a flimsy bipod. The thing was absurdly long, almost as tall as the man himself. When the soldier finally pulled the trigger, the recoil slammed him flat onto his back. The round pinged harmlessly off the Panzer's frontal armor. German crews howled with laughter over the radio. Elefantenbutz. The elephant gun. A ridiculous hunting rifle with no place on a modern battlefield. The nickname spread through Panzer units like wildfire. Here were the British, masters of empire and industry, apparently reduced to fighting tanks with oversized sporting rifles. But the laughter didn't last. Because when that same weapon was fired by a trained soldier, and aimed at the right spot, it could punch clean through the side armor of early German tanks at 300 yards. The hardened steel core entered the hull white-hot, ricocheting through the fighting compartment, turning the crew inside into casualties. Suddenly, the joke wasn't funny anymore. That absurd drainpipe was the boys' anti-tank rifle, and in the desperate early years of World War II, it was often the only thing standing between a British infantryman and an advancing tank. To understand why Britain fielded such a strange weapon, you have to go back to the 1930s, when military planners across Europe were losing sleep over the future of warfare. The Great War had introduced tanks, but it ended before anyone truly understood how to use them. By the mid-1930s, that ignorance was gone. Spain's civil war became a testing ground for modern weapons. Tanks were no longer curiosities, they were battlefield dominators. The Soviets were building them by the thousands. Germany was rearming in defiance of treaties, and everyone knew armored warfare was coming. British infantry doctrine relied on teamwork, artillery, machine guns, riflemen working together. But what happened when tanks broke through and the guns were miles behind the line? What could a foot soldier do against moving steel? Rifles were useless. Grenades meant suicide. Anti-tank guns were effective, but heavy, scarce, and never where you needed them most. Other nations faced the same nightmare. Germany fielded the Panzerbuchs 38. Poland developed the WZ.35. Finland would soon unleash the massive Lotti L-39. The solution was similar everywhere. Scale up a rifle, fire an enormous high-velocity round, and give infantry at least some chance to fight back. These weapons weren't meant to destroy tanks outright. They were meant to disable, shatter optics, wound crew, puncture radiators, and fuel tanks. Anything that could stop a tank long enough to survive. Britain's answer would become one of the most widely issued anti-tank rifles of the war, serving in every theater where British and Commonwealth troops fought, often mocked by German crews right up until the moment it killed them. The urgency was real. Reports from Spain showed what tanks could do to defenseless infantry. Britain's own armored forces were outdated, its doctrine confused, its budget gutted by post-war cuts. Worse still, British infantry had virtually no anti-tank capability. The .303 rifle round simply bounced off armor. Soldiers joked grimly that a tank crew wouldn't even notice being shot at. Artillery could help, if it was nearby. The 2-pounder anti-tank gun was still being developed, and even when available, it couldn't be everywhere. Isolated platoons, patrols, rear units, these men would face tanks alone. Morale collapsed when soldiers realized they had no way to fight back. By 1937, war was inevitable, and the War Office knew British infantry needed a man-portable anti-tank weapon immediately. That's when Captain Henry Boys of the Royal Small Arms Factory stepped forward with an idea that bordered on insanity. Design a rifle powerful enough to penetrate tank armor, but light enough for a soldier to carry. The physics were brutal. Armor penetration demanded immense kinetic energy. Boys chose velocity. He designed a massive .55-inch cartridge firing a hardened steel core at over 3,200 feet per second, producing more than 5 times the energy of a standard infantry rifle. The weapon that fired it was equally extreme. A bolt-action rifle with a barrel nearly 4 feet long, an overall length over 5 feet, and a loaded weight of 36 pounds. It featured a sliding barrel system, a massive muzzle brake, and a thick rubber butt pad, yet even then, firing it was violent. Inexperienced shooters were knocked flat. Veterans walked away bruised and deafened. But it worked. In 1937, The weapon entered production as the rifle, anti-tank, .55-inch boys, though even today, there's debate over whether it was truly named after its designer, or if that story came later. And that question leads directly into what happened next. That question, about the rifle's name, was never really answered. What is certain is this: Captain Henry Boys died in 1937, only months after his design was officially accepted. He never saw it fired in anger. The weapon that carried his name would become his final legacy. By 1938, the first Boys rifles were reaching frontline units. Just barely enough time remained to train soldiers before Europe collapsed into war. Training focused on two brutal realities. First, power meant nothing without placement. Shooting a tank head-on was pointless. Gunners were drilled to aim for side armor, rear plates, vision slits, engine decks, or tracks. Second, the Boys was an ambush weapon. Fire fast, fire accurately, then move. Staying put meant death. This wasn't heroic stand-up fighting. It was calculated nerve warfare, waiting silently as armored vehicles weighing dozens of tons rolled closer and closer, until a single mistake could kill you. When war erupted in September 1939, Britain had roughly 2,200 Boys rifles in service. Each infantry battalion was supposed to have them. They weren't ideal, but they were something. And soon, soldiers would discover exactly what that something felt like. The first time a man fired a Boys rifle, he never forgot it. Despite the sliding barrel, the massive muzzle brake, the thick rubber butt pad, nothing prepared you for the violence. The trigger pull alone required nearly 9 pounds of pressure. When it broke, the world exploded. A thunderous blast. A cone of flame. A shockwave that rattled teeth and ruptured eardrums. The recoil hit like a hammer. Medical officers recorded the results. Broken collarbones, usually from poor shoulder placement. Deep bruising that turned shoulders black and purple for weeks. Some men developed an involuntary flinch, jerking the trigger in anticipation of pain, destroying accuracy. The bolt action was no gentler. After firing, the shooter had to muscle the bolt open, rip the spent casing free, and slam a fresh round home. Under perfect conditions, 10 rounds a minute was possible. Under fire, with tanks advancing, that rate dropped fast. The ammunition itself was devastating. The standard armor-piercing round could penetrate around 15 millimeters of steel at 300 yards, more at closer ranges. Later tungsten core rounds improved penetration slightly, but angle mattered more than anything. A perfect 90-degree strike could kill a tank. A shallow angle might do nothing at all. That meant gunners were doing geometry under fire, calculating angles while machine gun rounds churned the ground around them. The Boys also found unexpected uses. It smashed through brick walls, sandbags, and fortifications. It disabled trucks, armored cars, half-tracks. Some units even experimented with long-range anti-personnel fire, though ammunition scarcity made that rare. Operationally, the weapon required teamwork. A minimum 2-man crew, gunner and loader. The bipod gave stability but slowed movement. Veterans learned quickly: fire from hard ground, stone walls, shallow trenches. Mud meant missed shots. Its true baptism came in France, spring 1940. When Germany launched Fall Gelb on May 10th, panzer divisions burst through the Ardennes faster than Allied planners believed possible. Tanks didn't advance in ones or twos, they came in waves. Near the Belgian town of Arras, a British lance corporal manning a Boys rifle from behind a stone wall engaged a Panzer II at roughly 200 yards. His first shot punched through the turret side, wounding the loader. The tank reversed in panic. 2 more shots damaged another vehicle before return fire forced withdrawal. It wasn't decisive, but it proved the point. German mockery faded. Panzer I tanks, with armor barely thicker than rifle-proof steel, were catastrophically vulnerable. Panzer IIs followed. German reports began mentioning British anti-tank rifles with something new: respect. North Africa reinforced the lesson. Italian armor proved even weaker. Australian units used Boys rifles to devastating effect, disabling multiple tanks by targeting engines and side plates. During the siege of Tobruk, the weapon helped deny reconnaissance units freedom to probe Allied lines. But success exposed the rifle's fatal flaw. German engineers adapted quickly. By late 1940, New Panzer variants rolled out with dramatically thicker armor, 30mm, then doubled. The boys simply couldn't keep up. Even tungsten ammunition struggled. Frontal shots became useless. Flank shots required suicidal proximity. Heavier tanks made matters worse. Against upgraded Panzer IVs, the boys might as well have been firing gravel. Greece and Crete proved the point brutally. Commonwealth troops watched round after round bounce harmlessly off advancing tanks. Many never got the chance to reposition for flank shots. Then came the Soviet T-34. Sloped armor, thick plates, complete immunity. The age of the anti-tank rifle was ending almost as soon as it began. By 1942, British units knew the truth. The boys was obsolete as an anti-tank weapon, but abandoning it meant having nothing at platoon level. So soldiers adapted. They turned it into something else. In Singapore, boys' rifles became bunker busters, punching through walls, collapsing sniper nests floor by floor. In the desert, desperate troops fired at low-flying aircraft, and sometimes, astonishingly, hit them. A weapon built to stop tanks had become a tool of improvisation. And that transformation, born from desperation, ingenuity, and survival, marks the final chapter of the boys' rifle's strange and violent journey. And once soldiers stopped asking what the boys could no longer do, they began discovering what it still could. That became painfully clear in Crete. During the German airborne assault of May 1941, New Zealand and Australian defenders turned the boys' rifle on targets its designers had never imagined. Paratroopers descending beneath white canopies were suddenly exposed, slow, predictable, helpless. A single .55-inch round striking a harness or body was instantly fatal. On captured airfields, boys' rifle teams fired into parked Ju-52 transports, puncturing fuel tanks and engines, destroying aircraft meant to reinforce the invasion. Even when the rifle's original purpose had faded, its psychological weight remained. In desperate situations, the man carrying the boys still held the most powerful individual weapon in the platoon, and that mattered when morale was thin and retreat loomed. That defiance showed itself again during the fall of Tobruk in 1942. Long after the outcome was clear, boys' teams continued firing at anything that moved: vehicles, bunkers, supply points. It was resistance for resistance's sake. A refusal to surrender while ammunition remained. Some uses bordered on the surreal. In Burma, soldiers reportedly used boys' rifles to blast apart log jams to create emergency river crossings. Others fired them as improvised signal devices, the enormous muzzle flash visible for miles. One unit even used a boys' rifle to drop a water buffalo blocking a critical road as Japanese forces closed in. When nothing else worked, the boys did. But the War Office knew the truth. By 1942, the rifle's anti-tank role was effectively dead. Its weight remained. Its ammunition remained scarce. And infantry still needed a way to stop tanks. The replacement was already coming. The projector, infantry, anti-tank, better known by its unfortunate acronym, PIAT, represented a radical shift. Instead of brute velocity, it used a shaped charge warhead capable, at least in theory, of defeating any armor thickness. On paper, it was revolutionary. In practice, it was complicated. The PIAT weighed nearly as much as the boys and was even more awkward to handle. Cocking its massive spring required brute strength and left the operator exposed. Its effective range was short, dangerously short. Accuracy suffered. Misfires were common. And its distinctive firing signature immediately gave away the shooter's position. Many veterans hated it. They trusted the boys instead. Obsolete or not, it was predictable. You aimed, you fired, and the round went where you pointed it. North Africa and Italy saw units reluctant to give theirs up, even as PIATs arrived. Some battalions carried both, boys' rifles for fortifications and soft targets, PIATs reserved for armor. The transition dragged on through 1943 and 1944. Bazookas appeared via American Lend-Lease, but never in sufficient numbers. 6-pounder anti-tank guns worked well, but required vehicles and crews. There was still no perfect man-portable answer. By Normandy, the decision was final. Infantry landed with PIATs and anti-tank guns. The boys' rifle was pushed into training roles and home defense units. A few lingered in Canada, Burma, and the Pacific, where Japanese armor remained vulnerable. By the war's end, most were scrapped, melted down to rebuild a shattered Britain. Yet the rifle refused to disappear entirely. Limited numbers resurfaced even during the Korean War, not because they could defeat T-34s, but because desperate soldiers used whatever weapons they had. Officially, the boys vanished from inventories by the late 1950s. Its influence, however, endured. Weapons designers learned critical lessons. High-velocity rifles could still matter, not against tanks, but against everything else. Vehicles, aircraft, radar, fortifications, equipment behind cover. That thinking gave birth to the modern anti-material rifle. Weapons like the Barrett M82 and Britain's own Accuracy International AS-50 trace a straight conceptual line back to the boys. Massive calibers, two-man teams, bipods, punishing recoil. The same idea, refined by decades of material science and battlefield experience. Captain Boys never intended to create a legacy beyond stopping tanks. But he did something larger. He proved that infantry could carry extraordinary firepower and adapt it when circumstances changed. The German elephant gun jokes stopped mattering the moment that first round punched through a Panzer side armor. For a brief window between 1939 and 1942, the Boys rifle gave British infantry something rare in modern war, a chance. That the window closed so quickly speaks to the brutal pace of technological change. That the rifle existed at all, and worked when it mattered, speaks to ingenuity under impossible pressure. And that may be the Boys rifle's real legacy.